Okay, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Perceptive podcast here on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. I am Josh Bycer, and we have another great cast lined up tonight. My guest is formerly from a AAA space who decided to go into the indie route, and he's here to talk about his games as well as some of the lessons learned. And as we were just saying, lessons usually involve a lot of pain when it comes to becoming an indie developer. So, please welcome from Arion Digital, Andrew Swihart. I hope I didn't butcher your last name too badly there.
No, that's perfect. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
All right, thank you so much for reaching out. It's always great when I get contacts from new developers, and I'm always unsure how far my reach is these days. I've said to people that I think I'm more famous everywhere except for where I live. No one around here knows what I do, and I get messages from people in Europe and India saying, "Oh, I read all your stuff." I'm like, really?
That's funny. Half the hits on my website lately have been from China and from Korea, and I don't know these people, but they're writing me. It's a weird feeling.
Yeah, I've got a lot of interest from developers and sites in China who've been translating some of my work that I post on Medium to Chinese-based game sites.
Yeah, there's a big demand in China, and I don't even have it's all written in English, but they're still playing the game. I can see on Steam they are playing the game. All the instructions are in English, everything. So apparently, either they know English or they're just willing to put up with it.
Oh, that is great. Oh, apparently, I just got a super chat. Thank you so much, Nobody. We'll certainly be talking about that. I'm sure marketing is going to be coming up as well. And yeah, there's certainly a lot to talk about. And Andrew's already given me the warning that he's got a lot of stories to tell. And we will see where we go. And what I just told him, there is nothing wrong with doing a part 2 or part 3. The fans know that I can sit, eat, drink, and talk design. So this is my bread and butter right here. But again, thank you so much.
I can run at the mouth too, so we'll see if people in the chat want us to move on to the next subject.
But as I said, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I guess my first question, as one I always like to ask people come on, is can you talk a little bit about your background, especially again with our topic tonight, and kind of what are the games that you've made so far? Kind of where are your credits as well?
Well, it's a big topic. So I originally started designing games when I was about 5 years old. I'd play games at the arcade, and I just loved video games, and I would design them. And my goal has always been, since I was a kid, I wanted to make games. I've had this passion in me to tell a story through games, through art, through interactive art. I just love the medium. I enjoy the process. I used to play a lot of arcades as a kid, and it was important to me. I got a Commodore 64 when I was in second grade. Definitely dating myself with that one. I really just wanted to make games. And when I was in high school, I had a friend who was a programmer, and he was like, okay, well, let's make a game together. And I thought, all right, here we go. And so he was actually building the engine from scratch. And I didn't know that because back then we didn't have Unity. We didn't have Unreal.
Now you're really dating yourself with that one.
And so I go over to his house and I have piles of designs and drawings and all this stuff. And, I'm into level 6 on paper, right? And he shows me what he has. And it's this square moves across the screen and stops. And I was thinking this isn't going to work. So it was about that time. So my focus and sort of my area of expertise has always been digital art specifically. So anything in that category, 3D, 2D, Photoshop, Maya, 3ds Max, Blender, photogrammetry, textures, substance. That's really my where I get paid to work, basically. I know enough about that. So about that time, I got an internship at a small company doing basically that. And from there, after a couple years, I was able to move to work at Activision on a series of Spider-Man titles.
Nice.
So Spider-Man the movie games, and a couple other titles that we worked on that got canceled that didn't actually see the light of day.
Oh.
And then I started working in the like internal development department, so like R&D division, working on photogrammetry. And back then, no one knew what that was. That was like the weirdest word anyone had ever heard. Which, for those that don't know, it's just taking photos and turning those into 3D objects that look photoreal. And also using a combination of LiDAR and laser scanning. And so I worked on that for a while. But the challenge I had with AAA, well, two things happened to me when I was working at AAA. I realized the unbelievable amount of work that it takes to make a title. It was like 400 people on these titles. Entire divisions dedicated to one craft, like animation, specifically character animation, specifically boss character animation, right? And that was like 4 people right there. And then multiply that across the entire spectrum of this massive project. So while I was working in the industry, I was thinking like, I am never going to make a video game. It's never going to happen. This is just too hard. It's too many things. And so it kind of made me think maybe this is the wrong path for a minute there. Maybe this isn't really going to be how I tell my story. And so about this point, I had been in the industry making games for about 10 years. And I was given an opportunity to jump and go work on some movies through some friends of mine. So I was working in Santa Monica, and it just, it was 5 miles down the road to Sony Pictures. And I went down there and I started working in film, and I ended up becoming a visual effects artist for about a little over 10 years. And I worked in a lot of films, about 15 feature films, and a couple that were canceled as well, that were really interesting. They just didn't make the cut. So they were terminated early. A bunch of music videos, commercials. I was a professional freelancer for a long time in the VFX world. And then I had an opportunity to start my own studio about 5 years ago. And I ended up catching a couple big projects, and we had about 34 employees at our height. So I was running the studio. And then when those contracts ran out, I realized I didn't really want to run a studio. It wasn't what I loved to do. And while I was there, we were using Unity at the studio. All of our productions were in the Unity pipeline. And I started seeing the Unity asset store and all the stuff that was on there. And finally, I realized, you know what? I can make a game now. It's possible. There's enough like content on the asset store where I can now actually build this product that I've been trying to build since I've been a kid. And I know there's some purists out there, and they're like, oh, you can't use, art from the asset store. That's an asset flip. And everyone's entitled to their opinion, but where do you draw the line? I mean, Atari had to make their own circuit boards, and their own operating system, right? So are we gonna are the old guys? Well, back in my day, we had to make our own circuit boards. We had to build our own operating systems, and we had to solder our own transistors onto the thing. That's a real game, it's like, where do you draw the line? So, and for me, at a big game studio, they're just paying people to create these assets anyway. It's not like there's one guy designing every aspect of the game. It's like, there's one person in charge who's basically looking at the dollars going out, and then he gives responsibility to more people and to more people underneath him, and everyone's building something. So why it's kind of the same thing in a weird way, because you're paying for stuff. In my opinion, that's my opinion. I mean, you're welcome to disagree. That's okay. So by using the asset store and actually having this new energy to okay, I can finally do this. I've released 2 games, and it was a small team. It was me and one other programmer. And then this most recent game, I was able to make entirely on my own, utilizing all the tools available. And so that was a big accomplishment. Now this newest game, deathoftherisingsun.com, if you want to play the free demo, is a demo still. It's not a final product. I'm sort of like getting the product out there, seeing what the response is, sort of evaluating, do I want to keep adding to this or do I want to cut this one loose at this point? But I think there's a lot of potential in the game, but I'm working on it. But Remnants of the Dawn was our last game that we made. Me and one of the programmers, Stephen O'Donnell, who's really talented, and we teamed up on that for 4 months, and we made that. So in a nutshell, that's my career and where I'm at.
All right. Definitely a lot to unpack. And like for myself, my first console was the Atari, way back then. And one thing that I find interesting, you said that you work at Activision on the Spider-Man games. One of my guests, and we do several casts and a roundtable discussion with them, is Tomo Moriwaki, who worked on Spider-Man 2, the game, the open world version of that. And okay. I think so. It's interesting that almost like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon here, 6 degrees of Spider-Man.
It's a small industry, especially around Spider-Man, because he's only been licensed to a couple companies. Mm-hmm. So I think Activision's one of them. I'm trying to think who else. But yeah, it is a small world. The game industry is a small world, especially here in Los Angeles. But
definitely. Yeah. And especially for independent developers as well. It's one of the things I've certainly have learned with interviewing so many people is that oftentimes I'll get contacts and then they'll say, oh, you should reach out to so-and-so, get them on for the show. Like, yeah, I spoke to them like 5 times already. I already did that.
That's funny. Yeah. There's definitely, I run into, there's a few studios and everyone seems to kind of like, just kind of bounce around back and forth from studio to studio, mm-hmm. They're over here, then they're back over here. And I'm always running into old friends whenever I go to one of those places. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Treyarch is where Tomo was. Yes, I know Tomo.
Nice.
I know Tomo. Yes. I worked with Tomo. He was, I think, lead game design. Am mm-hmm. I wrong? I think in certain aspects, he was game design on Spider-Man, the movie game. Yeah. He designed some stuff.
Yeah. Hey, Jerome, thanks for coming on. Yeah. And again, it's amazing about like how these career trajectories go, especially with the industry. Like, what year did you actually start Activision? Do you remember? I know it seems like 80 years ago.
It was right as the .com bust was happening. So I think 2000 or 99.
Okay.
I don't remember specifically. Oh, yeah. That's when it was. Right around 9/11 too. Mm-hmm. That was all kind of in there. I don't remember the exact amount.
Yeah.
And back then, Unreal had just come out, but mm-hmm. it was $1 million a site license. And I remember them letting us test it, and we were testing it. And the big takeaway was like, oh, you don't need a square texture. This is great. Like everything has to be tiles of 20 of, square. Mm-hmm. And that was what everyone liked. But it was $1 million, and then they wanted to get a back end fee. And so maybe this is something a lot of people don't realize. Most AAA studios that I've worked at anyway, I can only speak from my experience, of course, mm-hmm. use these really antiquated, terrible proprietary engines. Mm-hmm. Because they don't want to pay royalties. So we're running off this engine that's like a hack of a hack of a hack that was started production 20 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to, the interface is like, they always call it quirky, it's like little things. So actually using, the Unreal Engine and Unity is like probably the best tools I've ever worked with.
Yeah, and I'm starting to get a picture of why so many indie developers like to just build their own engines now, who've gone from that space. And yeah, and the reason why I asked about when you started is that it is such a fascinating thing to kind of like track, the growth of the game industry. Like, I've been playing games since 1988, when I was a small child who could barely play Super Mario Brawlers and could never finish those games.
on your 2-bit Atari or 4-bit Atari.
Yeah. Oh, that was... I think I had Popeye. That's the one game I remember from the Atari. Or I had I think it was like a strawberry shortcake game. Like, that was on the Atari, and like, no one in my family knew how to even play that game. It was just like, you hit a button, they started singing. It's like, did we play this game? Like, nobody knew what was going on there.
Atari had some pretty terrible games.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think most of the games were pretty terrible. I remember playing like a game where you were just a block running around,
Mm-hmm.
and then you'd shoot a block at another block, and that was like what was it, dog fighting, right? And now you're in the cockpit, like you can almost feel the wind blowing as you see the earth that's been like scanned from the real earth. And
it's
the glass actually bends the light, in front of you that you're looking through. It's really come a long way. It's a testament, I think, to the power of the personal computer and our fascination with escapism.
Oh, yes. And again, like I remember, back when like 8 megabits of RAM was considered top of the line. And I think right now this computer is like 32 gigabytes in it.
I remember my grandfather spending, I want to say it was like $1,500 to extend the RAM on my Commodore 64, and it was for 400 bytes. I think is what it was.
I think we're
4,000 bytes, maybe 4,000. That sounds about right. I think it was 4 megabytes. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure for like all the kids watching, we are depressing the hell out of them with this discussion.
We definitely sound like old guys, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
But it's okay because it's like now I feel like the task, even though it's still daunting being an indie game developer, like there's still so much you need to know. It's so much easier than it used to be to create great content. It's so much easier and so much more readily accessible to create great content. And there's really nothing holding you back. One of the other things that used to hold everybody back is distribution and publishing. Like publishing now is nice. Like it's nice to get a publisher. They make your job easier. Everyone would certainly like a publisher. They deal with that whole annoying marketing thing. They raise money for you. They get you on the Conan O'Brien show or whatever, right? Like they make all those things happen for a product. But back in the day, that was your only option. And so you see things like where comic book artists weren't even allowed to sign their own work, or the concept of Superman was completely taken from the creators and just basically stolen from them for just a little bit of money. So nowadays we can actually market our product and distribute it. And we don't have to sort of give the product away or sell half of it like we used to. So there's a lot of things that have really sort of opened the doors. Of course, it's opened the floodgates, so to speak, and we have to rise above all the noise. But at the same time, at least we can fight for ourselves, and we don't have to just give our product away or our IP.
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk about, as I was just telling Andrew before we started, like I do a lot of talks at libraries and schools. And one of the things I tell a lot of teenagers and kind of like students is that today is really like one of the best and worst times to get into indie development. And a big part of that, as you said, is both from the engine side and the publishing side. Like, as you said earlier, like Unreal costing like $1 million for a license. Like, just imagine trying to
plus royalties.
And now we fast forward today, and Unreal's like, yes, you can just use our engine for free. We won't charge you until you make $1 million off of it.
And we'll give you an entire library of Megascans content, and we'll give you everything you can find on the Quixel asset store. Oh, and here's a bunch of first-person shooter templates. Here, take it. Go have fun. It's because a long time ago, if you wanted to create a game, you had to know how to code. And I don't mean like just blueprints, right?
Yep.
You had to know how to do real coding in an actual language like C, C++, C#. And like for me, I'm dyslexic. So there's no way I can sit there and look at a screen of code. And now they have things where I can actually take someone else's code that works, stick it into my game, and now I have that function, and now I have that feature. And that's like a dream for the kid who's trying to build their own game. It never used to be like that.
And that was one of the reasons why, like, a lot of kind of like, you know, like the pre-indie era came from modders who would use, you know, the SDKs for games like Half-Life or StarCraft, Warcraft, and just, you know, use that as their template for whatever the heck they wanted to make.
And a lot of those people got real game design jobs. You know, they were basically taking the starting off point at a AAA studio, and they were working with that sort of that whole that platform, and then just adding creativity to it, which is really where a lot of us want to be. Like, we don't want to build something from the ground up. We don't want to dig the deep trenches. I think maybe that's why marketing is still a thorn in the flesh for indie developers, is because there is no real like easy jumping off point for marketing.
Yeah.
You do still have to do the hard work.
Oh yes, I do a show with Shark every Thursday where we review indie game store pages, and it is an area where a lot of developers tend to struggle with, even those who have like a professional background, because, like you said, it's not. Like we've said this before, it's not the glamorous side of game development. You know, for the people who want to make games for a living, they're not thinking about, oh, does my trailer resonate with my audience? You know, is this, you know, going to be highly marketable to the 18 to 30-year-old crowd? They're not really thinking about that.
So I'm at that point now where I'm wrestling with marketing again. And every time I come back to this point, I have to go back around the mountain. Every time I release a new game or release a demo, I have to make this jaunt around the mountain where I hit the marketing point and I go, oh, the marketing. But what's fascinating, and I think a lot of indie guys, you know, where they struggle with, is marketing is nothing like making a game. It's a very different skill set. It's more like you're trying to become a social media influencer than you are a nerd in front of a computer being like nerding out all day making stuff, or you know, like building things and having fun in your own little world. Now you're going from being completely introverted to completely extroverted, right? You have to make this huge flip, and some people do it well and some people don't. I'm still convinced, and I'm sure there's an exception to these rules, but I'm still convinced the best way to market a game is to have a professional marketer do it for you. The challenge, though, is that it's very expensive. And a lot of times, and I'm learning this also, a lot of the marketing has to be thought into the process of building the game itself. For example, this sounds so lame, but show business, right? We're building an enjoying experience. We're entertaining people, like show business. Well, it's not show, it's show business. And a lot of times in building the game itself, you want to think about, how do I monetize this from the get-go? Even before you're thinking about how to build your crafting system or how your boss fight is going to run, you want to start thinking about how you're going to get people to give you money. So you start having things like microtransactions, in-game advertising. That right there, right, makes your game more attractive to people that have money that can help propel you down the road, versus, well, I'm making a game that I really want to make. It's really fun, and there's no money in it other than like the price of admission. And also I'm noticing most, not all, but a lot of indie developers tend to make games that are more single player. And it's been proven time and time again that multiplayer is where the money's at. Multiplayers are cheaper to make for the same amount of time spent playing the game. Single players tend to be a lot of work, like making a movie, and people watch it once and put it away. They never come back to it. And these are things that the indie developer really doesn't want to hear. They don't want to hear this. They're like, no, I want to write my novel and I want it to be beautiful and it's like poetry and everyone's going to appreciate it and throw lots of money at me, when the reality is it's show business.
And it's always tough to walk that line between the art and the business side. Excuse me, my voice is cutting out there. And The Soren's Con. I think he meant like a in-game advertising, right? For in-game advertisement, like games that have like ads in them, like in the mobile space.
Yes.
And the problem with like that balance is that there are some amazing single-player games. Like so many of my favorite games each year come from independent developers who make a single-player game. Whether it was
Yeah.
something like Hades from last year, or Celeste, or it was brought up earlier, like Thomas Was Alone. Like these are amazing games that would never come from the AAA space.
No.
And of course, the counterbalance or the counterpoint is that you're not going to see these games being like, you know, multi-million dollar successes, like in the same way as something like Call of Duty or Red Dead Online or The Last of Us or anything in the AAA space. And I know for some of these developers watching this, I know what they're going to say. They don't care. They don't care if their game makes $5 million, $1 million, $500,000. And I think that is a fair point if you're focusing on the art. But like you said, and like I've spoken to other like developers, like my friend at Serenity Forge, that there's as much business in the art as there is art in the business, and it is something you need to consider, even if your game is this superly crazy experimental, game mechanics nobody ever thought to combine. Like, I don't know, a roguelike cooking, racing, space sim, or whatever like that. And I think where developers tend to struggle is that they get so caught up in the weeds of the art. And there's nothing, like I said, there's nothing wrong with making a overly artistic game. But like you said, like what we've talked about, you still need to, even in the back of your mind, think about, how am I paying my mortgage this month? How am I earning money off of this? And that is often where that line is between, being a hobbyist or an enthusiast in game development and actually having a business. This is your livelihood. And I've spoken to developers like Jake Burgett, Cliff Harris, Jeff Vogue, who like combined, I think, have like over 30 years of experience in the indie dev space, living off of their games. And one of the most important lessons that they've said is that you have to consider the business and production side of things. You need to think, okay, yes, this is a crazy out of this world idea. Can I make this on my budget? Can I actually make something that people will want to play? Because at the end of the day, if you make something that nobody wants to play, you got nothing. It's just a project.
Or if you make something that everyone enjoys, but you gave it away for free or nobody knows about it, right? These are all things that we have to consider on the business side of things. It's interesting that it's really easy to drop, $1,000 in 3 months on the asset store building your game, but nobody wants to drop $1,000 in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fascinating to me that we will spend all this time working on something that we care passionately about, yet when people give us feedback on how to improve it, we immediately reject them, right?
Oh, yes.
It's really interesting. And I think, again, this goes back to, the introverted versus extroverted sort of mentalities that required for these two different tasks. Mm-hmm. So I think actually AAA has done a pretty good job of dividing up the task. So to speak a little bit to my experience in AAA and how it's very different from indie games, good or bad. Indie games, you're sort of like a jack of all trades. Maybe you and one other person or two other people are working on a particular title. And you basically need these sort of 4 areas of expertise. And this is my opinion. This isn't documented. And you feel free to join in. The first level of the cake would be code. If without code, you don't have an interactive product. You have a piece of art or a board game. Okay. So somebody on the team has to know code or just the logic behind code. And whether it's the same person that does all the jobs, but that's just one aspect. And then the next on top of that, which is just as critical for a successful product, is game design. You
Mhm.
need to know game design. If you don't know game design, you're going to make basically a cinematic
Mhm.
or the most boring, uninteresting, beautiful, well-coded product, and it's going to be panned by the critics. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, at the same time, you could have both these things. You could have a really well-designed, well-coded, the most boring looking, no music, no effects, blocks just moving around, right? So on top of that, you have your art, your music, your embellishments, you're
Mhm.
making it fun and enjoyable from a design standpoint, right? Like, what would our games be like without great art or music or voice acting, all those sorts of things. So that's a really important part of the process. And then finally, sort of like on top of the cake, you have marketing. And
Mhm.
marketing, again, is a totally different thing. So at the AAA, what they do is they hire experts in each one of these fields, and those experts then go work in that specific field, and they bring it, right, but only in their specific field. So a lot of times working at a AAA studio, you're really focused on one, maybe two tasks. You're like the sniper, and then the guy next to you has the flamethrower, and then there's the medic down the hall, and then
Mhm.
there's the demolition man, and you fight as a team, right? And you're
Mhm.
all very good at one thing. Well, move over to Indy, right? You're
Mhm.
doing all of this stuff,
Yeah.
and most of the time, you're not going to be able to do all those tasks really well. Like, there's going to
Yep.
be one area you're going to be pretty lackluster in, right? So, but at the same time, you have to embrace it. You have to sort of like design a game based around your areas of expertise, and you have to still run with it and make the best of it, keeping in
Mhm.
mind that you want to monetize this. So, but at the same time, do you think, though, Josh, and I've seen this a lot, I feel like a lot of people just enjoy the process of making games, and they make a lot of little games that never go anywhere, or they
Mhm.
make games that are never really finished. And I think some of us, and it's okay to call us like amateurs because it's not a bad word, we just enjoy making the
Mhm.
product, whether it's successful or not.
Yeah.
But we're not paying people.
Oh yeah, and it's something that I say a lot in my talks that the game industry is a passion industry. It's not something people get into because, they're being forced to make video games for a living.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like we've said, at the end of the day, though, that passion can also be very blinding to some. And there's nothing wrong with being a hobbyist. But when you're trying to take that next step and say, I want to make my livelihood making
Yes.
video games, that's where the trouble comes in. And to your point about kind of, design, code, aesthetics, marketing, I would also add like production, actually being able to manage a team, manage, what is going on behind the scenes. Like, it's another thing that I see when indie developers kind of start to they kind of either start to become more professional, they start to like grow up or grow into their roles, whereas suddenly instead of a 1 to 2 man team, it's now a 10 to 20 man team. They oftentimes will struggle with how do you organize this? Like you said, when you worked at Activision or like at any AAA studio, these are teams in the dozens, sometimes in the hundreds. Like
Yeah.
like like the latest EA or Ubisoft game, it's like what, like 3 to 500 people across like 5 to 10 different studios of Ubisoft,
Not
all
counting the
working on.
testers, right?
Oh
Not even
yes,
counting the testers. Yeah.
and
Yeah, definitely production.
mhm,
I Production, it comes to like managing people, it's it's a challenging thing to do, especially if you don't have somebody that is focused on timelines. I think that's a big part of it. Like, what's due Friday, what's due the next Friday after that, and what's really due in a month. One of the
mhm,
frustrations I had working at AAA studios was, you say you'd work on a game for 3 years. Like, a big title takes about 3 years, at least it used to. Uh, and the first year, no one showed up to work. It was like an empty office. People would roll into work at 11 o'clock. Oh, it was lunchtime. They'd go to lunch. They'd come back. Hey, like, I remember being in meetings and people popping in and like, okay, you guys are up next for the foosball tournament that's happening down the hallway,
mhm.
and everyone running out because, we had 3 years.
Oh
No
no,
problem. We'll get this thing done. So end of year one, year 2 rolls around and, hey, wait, we don't have the first 6 levels done. We're supposed to have them done,
Mm-hmm.
And then the final year is like just a crunch of 10 hours a day, 6 to maybe you were made to feel bad if you couldn't do 7 days.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, you're a week.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, your family's more important to you than this. Like,
Oh God.
But being able to manage a schedule is of great value, and I think that indie developers can certainly and should teach themselves how to do that. So, my current demo, my game that's out right now, turn the game deathoftherisingsun.com, little plug there. I gave myself a timeline of 6 months. So I had to teach myself. So I used to work in Unity. So I switched over to Unreal on this one. I wanted to check Unreal out. So I said, I have 6 months to learn Unreal, learn how to code, and make a 45-minute demo, get it out there and see what people saw now, or what people thought. Now, there's a lot more I wanted to put into the product. There was, like, for example, I wanted a much better inventory system. I wanted to be able to buy things and sell things at like a market or a guy in the game. So when you're out scavenging and you're picking up items, you can then go buy and trade for better items or health packs or things like that. Well, I just wasn't able to get it in that amount of time. I was able to get a lot of stuff in the game, but just not that thing. So I just cut it. And I said, no, I got to stick to my timeline, because if this drags on too long, I'll never get done. And I think that's something that I would recommend people trying. Don't just sit on a product. I think perfection is the enemy of good, and with the 80-20 rule, and knowing that the longer a production takes, especially when you're self-financing it, the least likely it is that it's going to actually be finished. Just give yourself a window, say, okay, whatever's done by this time is done, and then get it out there in front of people and see what people think. Is a really good mantra for the indie game developer, because that's what AAA does. I've seen entire levels cut from games, like major levels, like sewer systems, like the entire sewer system was cut from one of the Spider-Man games, just gone, because they still had a launch date and they had to get it out on time,
Oh, yes. I recently played a Shadow Man that was a remastered, and they added in a lot of cut content, and it's always fascinating to just see, everything that was like left on the cutting room floor. And I think that's a very huge distinction between indie and AAA. Like, indie developers, they're going to put everything they want into a game. Because, again, they don't have to worry about a publisher. They don't have to worry about shareholders demanding any projects. And
That's right. Or a license that's owned by somebody else, and they have to do something.
Yeah, you only have that license for like an X amount of time, and after that, you can't work on that anymore. And we have seen many examples of games that have been pulled off stores, or content removed because of copyright infringement, and that's just its own. That's another 40-minute discussion. I won't get to nobody's question, and thank you again for the sewer chat. I really do appreciate it. They ask, do you guys have any recommendations for cinematic? Sometimes I feel it'd be better just do 3D movies with expansions instead of putting in levels. I think he's talking about kind of putting in cutscenes and focus on that, because that's another thing I think, presentation-wise, that is a huge difference between indie and AAA. I'm old enough to remember when Blizzard released a new 2-minute video, just a cutscene, no gameplay whatsoever, and everybody just stopped. When the opening of Diablo 2 was revealed, or Warcraft 3, or even just World of Warcraft. I remember it's they just put out a new trailer. We need to watch this, and I think again that gets at kind of the heart of the presentation side, because, like you said a few minutes ago, AAA developers, they have full-on art teams. They hire multiple artists that, they are going to digitally render every blade of grass and every crack in a brick wall. And any dev, a 1 to 5 person, even just a 10-person team, they're never going to come to that level of quality. And it's not, a knock against them. It's just simply, time to money or time to energy of what it takes to do this.
Well, even if you had a way to get every blade of grass in there, which I would be surprised if an indie could, you're going to have to deal with optimization on multiple platforms, especially if you're making a PC game. So my latest demo, again, somebody, deathoftherisingsun.com, contacted me and said, hey, your game is too heavy for my machine. I was like, okay, well, too bad for you, but then they were like, but I'm a reviewer and I'd really like to write you a good review. And I said, okay. So I had to go get a settings menu and put it in there. And the only way I could get it to run on low end platforms was basically to turn off shadows, like just turn them off, like completely. Whereas at a AAA studio, there's someone sitting there, there's a whole team of people working on that one problem, getting it to run at lower end, like combining meshes, optimizing textures, even going into the shaders themselves and finding ways to make the shaders less expensive through less cycles. Like an indie dev doesn't have time to do that. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you're just lucky and you have all the time in the world. But again, I think that it's really important to give yourself a timeline. Say, I need to have something by the end, my next birthday, whatever. Have a plan. Sit down and say, this is what are you even trying to say? I think what's interesting is when you work at a AAA, you're basically told what to do. It's like a military situation. Like when I went to go work on some of those titles, I didn't come up with the concept. Stan Lee had come up with the concept. And I was just telling Stan Lee's story, right? Which is fine. I was getting paid to do it. There's nothing wrong with that. But something that you lose is you lose your creativity. You lose that creative force of what do I want to say? What story do I want to tell? And I think that that's really, though, going back to it, that's really where indie developers really bring the most. And I think that's in the heart, the passion. It's not just a job. They have something they want to say. And so I definitely recommend, though, coming up with a timeline and working with that timeline. And then I really wanted to add a lot of art to my game, but after that last that last person got back to me, I thought, wow, I'm not going to be able to use like all the super cool shaders I wanted to use. Unless there's a switch, like, is my PC suck or is it good? You just switch.
Yeah, and I spoke with I forget his name. He was the creator of Rampage back in the day, who's also doing indie development. I can't believe I forget his name. I did an interview with him, and he runs an independent studio, and he said very much that same thing. Like when you're at a AAA studio, you have like 1 to 2 jobs. That's it. Like you're done. Like And the reason why I brought up Blade of Grass was he said that. Like, he said, like, if you are hired to render every blade of grass, that's it. You are going to be rendering every blade of grass for the next, 6 to 12 months. And if you enjoy doing that, more power to you. But if that sounds, worse than torture, it's not going to work. And like we've said, and we've said this many times over, like, in the independent space, you wear the every hat. You are the developer, you're the programmer, you're the marketeer, you're the artist. And unfortunately, it's a lot of work, as I'm sure you're aware of, and I'm sure my audience is aware of as well, that when you have to do everything, it becomes very hard to finish these projects. And it is that challenge of what can I do versus what I want to do. Because I'm sure every developer watching this doesn't want to release a game with subpar 3D or a UI that, isn't the best looking. But
or doesn't work.
Yeah. And it is that push and pull, because as someone who talks to developers, I understand that. I know that I'm not expecting, your 12-month project to look like Doom Eternal or have the same breadth as Star Citizen or No Man's Sky. Yeah. But the consumer doesn't care.
They don't care.
That's the nicest way that I can put it, but they don't care. They don't care that you took a second mortgage on your house, or you skipped all your son's Little League games, or your marriage is falling apart because you had to try and finish this boss fight. All they see is a store page, a game, and they go, wait, this doesn't, that shadow looks off, that character animation is janky. Nope, I'm out. I don't want to play this.
Part of my marketing strategy has been Facebook ads, and people tell you what they think. And I've had a few. I mean, I think there's sort of like I used to be scared of it, but now having heard so many indie game developers say this, I see it as a badge of courage when they're like, "This game sucks," or "Why doesn't it look as good as another game?" or "This is clearly a crappy game," or and they're just some kid on a cell phone, going through their Instagram feed in Nairobi. Like they don't even care. And to us, it's like a stab in the heart. Like, no, what do you mean? I worked so, I didn't have time to finish that last part. But again, though, I do think that it's okay to leave things unfinished as long as the greater whole is still valid by whatever it is whatever story you're trying to say, or whatever you're trying to express to your audience. Like, it's okay to not have the best graphics if you're really focused on one thing that shines, and hopefully it shines enough to attract a wider audience, because there's no way you're going to be able to do all these things without help. So if it really is just you, like, for example, Josh, like, I would imagine if you were to make an indie game, the design would be amazing, right? So you just kind of have to set that out there and say, okay, this is about design, and this is what I do. So enjoy the design. The game design is going to be rocking, but the 3D models maybe not look so great. There's going to be kind of some weird head turns and funny stuff going on. And that's just where we find ourselves. And I think that's okay. As long as you don't promise the audience something that they're not going to get, right? So one of the conversations I had was people were telling me that my demo looked too good, and people would expect a certain level of gameplay that they weren't going to get. And I was like, okay, well, I can't solve the gameplay problem, but at least they'll think it looks good, right? Like, you kind of have to see what it is you major on and just let that push you and focus on that as an indie developer. Because we're not going to have all those blades of grass. It's just not going to happen.
And speaking about that, one question I want to ask you about, like, with our overall topic, kind of AAA to indie. Like, in your opinion, what was, like, the biggest, like, shift in, like, your mentality or your game dev sense, going from working at a major company to doing it on your own? Like, what was, like, the thing... excuse me. What was the thing that kind of, like, shocked you or caused you, like, the most trouble making that change?
I think finding my voice, haven't been told what to do for so long, haven't been sort of given a marching orders from a producer and from an art director or a game designer, just being told, do this, do that. It took me a while to find my voice and sort of allow my creativity sort of to kind of come back. When you're working on a big game that didn't do very well or did do really well, but it had a major quirk, it's really easy to say, well, I didn't work on that part. That's not my part, right? I worked on all the grass. The grass looked good though, right? It's very easy to sort of, just not take responsibility for the greater game because you really had no responsibility for it. But when you're working on an indie game, you have to make all those creative decisions for yourself. And you're the ultimate sign off for everything. So if you put something out there and it has a major flaw and people point that out, it's on you. There's no one to point at. So that was a big shift, really having to own what I was doing and then having to do my own research. Like, well, okay, I want to make a game that's kind of like, like a poor man's Tomb Raider, or that's kind of where I was headed with mine, right? And so, well, I would say an indie Tomb Raider, right? Well, what people expect from a game like Tomb Raider is mass sets, mass environments, constantly changing those environments. Like we're not in an arena. We're going through like the mountains, then we end up at a camp, and then we get in a boat, and then we sink. We're in a submarine. It's like Uncharted level work, right? So I had to really say, well, what is it about Tomb Raider I really like? What is it about Uncharted that really attracts me to this kind of game? And sort of boil it down and to make it small enough and bite size where I could actually begin to move forward in a meaningful way, rather than just scrawling these giant visions that could never actually come to pass. And I think that's where it comes back into the managing your time, or giving yourself, like being really serious when it comes to managing your tasks, and just being realistic with what you can actually do.
Yeah. And like you said, like going from having no autonomy to all of it is, I think, a very challenging point. It's something, again, I see from a lot of indie developers, that idea that I can literally do anything that I want. What do I do now? And it's just like, your brain just shuts down. I have enough trouble these days just picking what video game I want to play over the I don't even know anymore. I think I'm up to like 3,000 to 4,000 Steam games. It's like, yeah, I want to play a video game. Yeah, which one? And it's just like,
what do I feel like today? I just click this one. No, never mind. Let's go back. It's like finding a game on Netflix, or finding a show on Netflix, right? It's like you just scroll and scroll. Yeah.
I just need like a giant roulette wheel that I can just spin and just like, okay, I'm going to play whatever it lands on this tonight and just call it.
I think it's important from an indie perspective to have a good understanding of the difference between what you want to do and what you're actually good at, and where those two things intersect. Because one thing is going to give you passion, like what do I want to do? And the other thing, what am I good at, will actually keep you grounded and keep you moving forward and being successful. It's something people will actually want to buy. For example, where I've always been able to find work is in art, 3D, etc. So I knew that my game should have something to do with that to really move it forward. It needs to be rooted in, some kind of cinematic 3D art-ish vibe. And I wanted to tell sort of a story. And just knowing that that's going to have to be what carries it, So depending on who you are and where you fall into those categories, right? Are you a really good programmer? Are you a really good game designer? Are you really good at the aesthetic and selling the experience? Or are you just a great marketer and you just want to market for other indie game guys and gals? It really, we have to have that honest opinion. Otherwise, we're going to really frustrate ourselves and make something people won't want. And that kind of takes us back to show business.
And Amir brought up, I think, a really good question. Would you say there are any bad habits that AAA developers have that affect a shift to indie and vice versa? Because I think that's another interesting point. We have seen indie developers who made a big enough name for themselves, who then get picked up by like a AA or a AAA company, and then it's like we said earlier, it's just like two completely different worlds sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely. I'm sorry, I'm reading the question right now. Would you say there are any bad habits that AAA devs have that affect the shift to indie and vice versa? Well, AAA is sort of like a large group of people with a lot of money behind them. It's sort of like the rich versus the poor, right? And when you're an indie, you're trying to maximize every dollar, every hour. You are taking time off of life to do this for free. So you're really trying to suck the juice out of the small pieces of fruit, right? Whereas the AAA guys see the world quite differently because they can see really far off into the distance. They can enjoy being paid to travel very deep into a remote area as a team of people, set up camp and explore something that no one's ever looked at before with the ability to conquer it, right? Whereas in indie, we're just trying to get that next task checked off our list and hoping we have time this weekend to do it or spend time with our children or our wife. So I think where the bad habits of the AAA is sort of like thinking that their one piece is sort of like what's the most important thing, and they can just kind of run with that. Whereas an indie has to be take into account not just all the pieces, but how far can I even run with any one of these pieces and still sustain myself and maintain it and still make this product happen. Is that a roundabout way of saying it? Maybe. What do you think, Josh? Is that a little too weird? But that's been my experience. Like, I only have so much time to do something, and I have to get it done because I can only afford to do it so long. So if I'm going to be on a AAA studio, if it gets done, it'll get done. It'll get done. I'm gonna go do foosball. I'm gonna answer emails into 2 p.m. afternoon. That won't carry you through indie. It won't carry.
And I think the other point is that you're on a team in the AAA space. If you're not, if you're busy practicing for foosball, I'm sure there's 5 to 10 other people who are also working on the same thing. In an independent space, if you take a week off to, I don't know, go kayaking somewhere, that's 7 days you're not getting back. That is 7 days of missed development. And
the game will not build itself.
No, it will not. At least not yet, unless someone wants to develop the self-developing game. Maybe that will happen at some point.
In a few years, AI is going to be building games, yeah.
There we go, perfect. And they'll play foosball as well, I'm sure.
Just to be clear, I'm speaking from my own experience. Foosball is something to blow off steam, but it does definitely start to become a nuisance. And usually there's a point in the project when foosball is now banned.
And I guess another thing I want to ask you about in terms of like kind of how things have shifted over the last 20 years, I think kind of the kinds of games have really changed. Like earlier you mentioned, of course, multiplayer. Multiplayer has become mega huge business for AAA developers and as well as for lots of indies. But I also want to kind of bring into this discussion about what kinds of games are being made. Like, again, when we think 90s, I think platformers. When I think, early thousands, maybe even to the end of thousands, I'm thinking, first-person shooters, open-world games. And it feels like we're seeing more of, I guess, like the artistic side really coming forward in the past 10 years. Like, the independent space, again, I don't need to bring up examples with my eyes, because we've talked ad nauseum about it. But even with stuff like Life is Strange, The Last of Us, Horizon Zero Dawn, even what they're trying to do more of the Far Cry games, there's certainly been this push, I feel, to go beyond just gameplay. And at least, I think, in both spaces.
Well, there's been a lot of things that have happened since the year 2000. I feel like in terms of visuals, I think the year 2000 was when things really started changing. It started changing quickly. It has a lot to do with processing power, and it has a lot to do with graphics cards just exploding in power. And it also, though, has a lot to do with us learning as a community, learning from the mistakes of our past. So nowadays, like to bring us all the way forward to today, you can do on a real-time engine post-processing, which was never even conceived of before. You can do real-time ray tracing, which is incredibly, no one would ever thought that could happen. And you can do, like, I remember back in those days when you wanted to do a reflection of a building, you duplicated the building in 3D and put it under the other one and then made it slightly opaque. That was your reflection. And these days, you just put reflection balls out into your scene and hit run reflection pass, and it updates live as your character runs around. So we've been learning from the mistakes of our past, and we've been building these incredibly good systems that allow us to build things that look so real. We also have like the sort of the embracing of using things like Poser and Cinema 4D to create humans, where it used to be you had to make your own human. But now you can export a human or almost human. I don't know how many of those you've seen lately, So I can just go to a tool and spit out a human that looks very real, with dynamic hair and eyes that look around, morph targets on the face. And I can do this just by clicking a button. I can spend a few hours designing a human, where it used to be you would need someone who had studied anatomy. They were really good in ZBrush. They would go and they'd sculpt that for you. So many, and then like Quixel with all the mega scans, all that stuff is just now in our games. So there's a whole team of people going around the world right now, photographing and laser scanning the environment that you for free can just throw right into your game. So the visuals are becoming really, really good as of late. I want to say the last 5 years, I've noticed a few games that I was really shocked. Like The Last of Us? I think it was. And also some of the new Uncharted things. I was thinking, wow, this is starting to look like a movie, and some of the guys that I keep in contact with are still working on films down in Santa Monica, working on like The Mandalorian, and they're using the Unreal Engine instead of a green screen now to put the sets up, right? And so and they're doing these really realistic lighting calculations. So a lot of the backgrounds you see in The Mandalorian, not all of them, but a bunch of them are actually video games. So it's gotten so good. The video games have gotten so good in what they can do. Now, granted, that's a super computer running that stuff. That's not a GameCube, right? That's a super computer. But the fact that we can even do it is incredible. I can't even imagine what's going to look like in 10 more years when the AI is also going to be helping the artists and cleaning up facial mocap based on AI. We're going to have some pretty realistic looking games.
Yep. Oh, yes. And I want to get to 10's comment. Asked about planning on releasing the prototype version of our indie FPS game. And they're talking about launching and recording analytics. I think one of the issues I think a lot of indie developers run into is with the playtest. And this goes back to what we were saying earlier regarding feedback. And I think this is one of those things that I think this is one luxury that AAA has that indie would kill for, is being able to have focus groups and, easily reach out to hundreds of, maybe even thousands of people who want to try this game out and provide all manner of feedback. But I guess, again, like going from AAA to indie for you, like, what has it been like, I think, finding feedback and then even just being able to, run with it? Because we've had talks here about being able to accept criticism and understand feedback many times over.
Well, and I remember in AAA, I think it was about the halfway point in the game, our Q&A department went from 10 people to about 50 people. And it was downstairs, and it was this giant sort of everyone playing the same game and basically opening bugs, closing bugs. And then they would bring in new people who are working on other projects, and they would continually cycle them through so they got a fresh perspective. And that was downstairs. So when I was sitting upstairs at that particular time where I was, my back was against the big glass conference room door, and all the game designers were sitting in there watching the recordings of the playtesters. And all it was them screaming at the screen, "No, why are you doing that?" Go the other way. And I really wish I would have paid more attention to that, knowing now that I would be making my own games. But there was another situation I remember too, where so they were getting live feedback all the time. They kept changing the levels. They were constantly just altering. Like you had maybe two designers on two levels, and then it would help each other, right? One was better at scripting, the other one was better at level design. And so you would have these two designers working on just one level, and they would be constantly changing the level with little tweaks and coming to me, "Can you move this over there?" And I'd move it, and making these little adjustments all the time while people downstairs constantly played and gave them feedback. Now, for an indie, that's a huge luxury, right? How do you get that? So what I'm trying to do right now is I released my demo, and I have a survey and I gave the demo out for free. I posted on Steam and Steam News, "Please play my game for free and give me feedback." And what you can do though in Steam is you can watch how long people play. it does give you that. And there are some other things that you can put in to the analytics. Now, you can't actually watch the people play the game. You can watch maybe the influencers play the game if you're on WooVit or some of the other sites that allow influencers to pick up your Steam keys. And I've been doing a lot of that. Like, I'll watch the videos of what they do and then reach out to them and say, what did you think? You know, try and get feedback from them directly, or even on a Discord. All those things you kind of like have to put together to try and replicate what I was experiencing at the AAA studio, because they were just hiring tons of people who enjoyed playing games to give feedback. So that might be a good solution, to just kind of release something early. That's a demo or early access, and get as much feedback as you can. Give it away for free. Get surveys out there. Get lots of people to play it. It's surprisingly how many people don't care about a free game to play. So it's still a bit of work. You're going to have to hustle that up, but it's definitely worth the feedback, especially seeing how long people play. My first moment, the other game that I made, the average play time was 15 minutes. And Steam was telling me this is bad. My current game, Death of the Rising Sun, the average play time is 45 minutes. So I'm like, okay, so that's better. We're getting better. And that's how I've been trying to do it. If that answers your question.
And like what you just said there about, you know, time spent playing, like that's another thing I think a lot of people, not just in the AAA but indie space, definitely have trouble with, is that there's so many games being released these days, and most people aren't going to stick with a game even if there is just one issue. You know, the game is amazing, but the menuing is annoying. Skip. And like for myself, I've said this, that most games have about 15 to 30 minutes to convince me to play it. And
maybe 5. Maybe 5 for most people, Josh. Maybe 5.
Yeah. And if something annoys me in like that first 15 minutes, it's just downhill from there. Like, even if I like the game where I'm playing, if I'm starting to feel annoyed 10 minutes in, I'm moving on. And the thing I think a lot of developers need to understand is that, guess what? There's about 30 to 50 games being released weekly these days. Your game is unfortunately not special. And if your game doesn't work for people, they don't have the time or the energy to kind of, you know, find the fun in it. And unfortunately, it has led to a lot of games that have just, you know, sunk like a cement block on release. Like, I've seen games that, like, a year to 2 years later, they have maybe less than 10 reviews. They may not even have any reviews on their game. And it doesn't matter anything about it. That game is dead. It was a failure.
I'm seeing what 10 is saying about minimum viable product and early access. So I actually completely agree with him. You need to get a minimum viable product out to the population. You need to get feedback, but early access, if it's too early, can kill your game. So what I personally have done is I have it as I'm just giving away beta test keys to anyone who joins my mailing list. So I route people to my website, deathoftherisingsun.com, and there you can hit me up with an email and I will send you a beta test key. And I have to do this by hand. I've had, I think, about 500 requests in the last week for the demo. And I can still monitor the analytics. And then I reach out to the people and say, hey, did you fill out the form? What did you think? A lot of people blow me off, but a lot of people have been playing the game, and at least I can see the analytics. So that's very helpful. But back to what you were saying, Josh, about making a game stand out. So I thought I would make something that was really good for 45 minutes. I really should have made something that was really good for 15 minutes. I should have spent 6 months on 15 minutes. And I think that if I had done that, then whatever worked in that 15 minutes, then I would have a template to move forward with the rest of the project. 45 minutes was a bit of a mouthful. So back to what you're saying. People don't like how the UI works. People think that the controls are clunky. People get annoyed really quickly with something that's obviously a bug. They'll just turn the game off. But if I can make 15 minutes of brilliance, 15 minutes of sheer excitement and ecstasy, they're going to be asking me for more, versus suffering through my product. So to any indie devs out there, I think 15 minutes, and from what I've been talking to some other people, particularly one friend of mine who keeps reminding me of this and trying to pound it into my head, 15 minutes. 15 minutes, I think, is the magic number in terms of giving someone the premium experience in a demo to see if you're really onto something and you can stand out in the crowd.
Yep, and I think this is one thing that, there's definitely this growing trend of quote-unquote micro games. This idea that a game is only 5 minutes, it can only be maybe 20 minutes long. And it is an experiment. It's a way to really just see if this is worth doing. And I think that's another thing that I think indie developers tend to have trouble with, is this idea of, is this worth pursuing? Because, like we've said, when you don't have shareholders, you don't have, a producer hanging over you saying, we don't like this, you need to change this, you can do whatever you want. And it has led to some amazing games, but it has also led to games that there's just no market for it. Whether it's because the gameplay is too esoteric, or that the visuals and the aesthetics are just not there. And you have to, I think, as a developer, understand that there has to be something. There has to be that hook. And if you can get that hook, that's almost half the battle right there. I've played Shark and Chai. I played his game. He showed to me, this was, very early alpha. No art whatsoever. It was all placeholder temp art. And people were getting into the gameplay. They were enjoying it. This was, again, this was nowhere near a minimum viable product. But people were at least enjoying it at that level. And if you can at least start there, you're going to be better off for it. And with some of the micro game examples, I know a few of them that the 10 to 20 minute, however long game it was, people enjoy that to the point that they're developing it into a larger project, or they're taking the elements that worked and going, hey, why don't we just take what worked, get rid of what didn't work, and let's make something bigger. And it's why playtesting is such an important part about this. And there's a reason why when people send me their games, these days, I send them back kind of the unlisted stream of me playing their game, because that stuff is, worth its weight in gold to a developer, especially somebody who doesn't have a team of playtesters.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. The micro game concept is, as an indie, is definitely where I find myself more focused at. I think it's a really easy trap to fall into, the game will be fun when I add this next huge feature. Oh, the game will be fun when I add all that amazing artwork. Oh, the game will be fun when I put in all the sound design. Well, the truth is, if your game isn't fun at a level like Pac-Man, it's going to be really hard. That game loop's really tight. It's really nice. It presents itself within the first 15 minutes as well-defined and easy to figure out and enjoyable. I think you're basically building a giant thing that no one's going to want. And as an indie dev, we only have so many sort of swings at the plate. We can't just sit here in front of our computers and watch all of life pass us by while we fight like a Spartan till the day we die to make an indie game. You maybe have, some people have 2 shots, some people have more, some people have less, right? Some people have no shots. So every time you do this, you have to really optimize and iterate on your last attempt, and really keep in mind that at the end of the day, if people don't like that first 15 minutes, they're not going to play your game. They're just not. So why not make 15 great minutes? And if people like your concept, then you have something and you can run with it.
Yep. Absolutely. And again, it's why we say so much about the opening of your game is important. that, the first 30 minutes, the first level of your game should be the absolute best part of it. Because if it's not, it doesn't matter if you have a Game of the Year winning idea that takes 60 hours. Most people aren't going to play that.
Even great games,
yep.
even games that are lauded by the community as like Final Fantasy. Like, how many people actually really complete those games other than the diehard gamers? Like, not that many. Most people don't want to play a game for more than 30, 40 minutes. And surprisingly, a lot of people don't want to play a game that's too hard. I know that it's impressive, Josh, to watch you play in the hardest level.
Or it's funny, as the chat here can demonstrate.
But not too many people are up for that. And a lot of people kind of want a casual experience that they can put down and come back to, So there's a lot of things to consider. But again, like that hook, that initial hook, that's something that really makes it stand out from the crowd, that is bright and beautiful, that catches people's eye when they play their game. If you don't have that, I think that you really need to find it.
And I think one of the more fascinating things that I've been looking at these days is, as you said, the completion rates. How many people actually play through this game, and you can get that by the achievements. You can look at how far somebody gets, and it is fascinating to me just how few a percentage of people actually finish games. And I'm sure they love these titles, but most games average 30 to 35% of the audience is actually making it to the end. And we're talking about an 8 to 10 hour long game. We're not even talking about a 60 to 80 hour long RPG.
Like Assassin's Creed Legacy or whatever, right? Normal game, yeah. Yeah, it's surprising. And I think that as a game designer, as a storyteller, you should be able to tell your story in 15 minutes. You should be able to set the precedent in 15 minutes. Otherwise, maybe you don't know what it is yet. And that's okay. You're trying to find it, but maybe you don't know what it is yet. So, but I do encourage people to show their game to as many people as possible. Show it to people. The second indie game that I made, it was called Remnants of the Dawn. That game, it was just me and one other person working on it. We came up with a play mechanic, and my wife wanted to see it. And I said, okay. So I showed it to my wife, and she goes, you know what I don't like this part of the game. It just kind of bugs me. I'm like, well, she doesn't play games, right? And then I showed it a little later down the road to some more people, and they kept saying, yeah, I'm not crazy about this one aspect of the game. But by then it was baked in. It was baked in. The whole system was built around this core mechanic. And then we released it on Steam, and everyone was saying, we don't like the system.
Yep, and this is why playtesting is such a very big point, because if you can figure out that people hate X when you can still change it, that's great. When you realize people hate X and your game is out and there's no way you can remove it, no, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
And
please show it to people. Please get opinions. Please show it to people. You'll save yourself heartache. And it's okay if someone doesn't like something. I think as indie developers, because it's such an introverted process, and that I don't use that as a negative word. It's just a reality. We're deep in our own minds and our computers as we do it. We think that when someone makes a comment, it's a bad thing. They're actually helping us out sometimes. Not always, but most of the time they're helping us. So when someone says, I don't like that, and you're you take it as a personal assault, it's really not. It's people are giving you honest feedback, and you have to consider that,
Yeah.
And the more you get of that, like right now, I have, like I said, about 500 of my demos out right now, and I've gotten a lot of feedback, and a lot of people keep saying the same thing. So, hey, maybe I need to listen. Maybe there's something there.
And like you said, there are developers who struggle with that. I like my game, but the problem's on you, and
you just don't get it.
Yeah, and for people watching us right now, you may think we're joking, but there are developers who have said that. I've heard horror stories of people going to convention and seeing someone say, "Oh, it's not the game, so let me show you how to play my game." And it's just, no, don't do that, please.
Well, if you're making an art piece or a
Hmm.
statement, and you see yourself as like someone who wants to contribute in a
Hmm.
way that is outside of the norms, like you want to come up with the next Parappa the Rapper, right? Just something completely out of nowhere, no one was expecting. I think that there's a place for that, but if you are not, I hate to say the word clever enough, but if game design is not your strong point, like listen to what people have to say about game design. If
Hmm.
art is not your strong point, listen to what people have to say about art. It's okay to take criticism. Some of the criticism I've gotten on my game is, intense, but I'm going to make those changes. I can't yet in this phase. In the next phase, and you know, I'm at release point 2 right now. When at point 3, I'm going to make a bunch of changes based on the feedback, and I know the game will be a lot better.
Yeah.
And they're even right. I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Hmm. And to 1-0's comment about releasing the minimum viable product to the public or focus groups, I don't know if I would advise public in that. Because, as we've said, the public can, when they see the very first version of your game, that becomes, I think, their only, experience of it. Like, I think it's a lot harder than people realize to get somebody to come back to revisit a game. Unless they're being paid for it. And part of this issue is that if you play a game and you don't like it, why would you come back to try it again 8 months down the line, a year down the line? And again, it's that give and take of how do you show this off to people. And I think like doing like as you said with demos or having giving out demo keys or doing something that isn't the official launch is I
Yeah.
think the wiser strategy. And again, like early
And I
access,
can turn those keys off, by the way, Josh. I
yeah,
can disable them already. Yeah. Go
like
ahead. I apologize.
oh, that's okay. Like with early access, there are developers who they will put their game on early access when all they have is maybe just literally, okay, here's a house. You can open up the door. That's my entire, this was my very first prototype that didn't blow up a computer. This is what my early access version is. And what we've seen again is that when you go on early access, it is kind of a soft launch. Like people expect to see quality day
Yeah.
one. And I think this is, I think, a tough lesson. I think this could be something different from AAA to indie. Maybe you can expand on that. In the AAA space, nothing is kind of, revealed haphazardly. It's not, no AAA studio is going to accidentally hit a button and say, oh, we just released our, pre-alpha build for people to download. There's that very high sense of curating every single trailer, every single screenshot that goes out, and it gives off that sense of quality. And I think it's one of the things that AAA has really become famous for, that there is that level of polish. When we look at a AAA game and I can see the individual hairs on somebody's arms or, a complete shading and rendering of a beard, people get wowed by that. But for the independent space, there's this tendency to just say, I'm going to put anything, the second I get a screenshot, or the second I get, even just like a basic character walking, I won't reveal it to the public. And I think that level is, that can hurt your game. Because people, like I said, people will associate the very first thing they see with the entirety of your project sometimes.
It's absolutely true. So I guess the challenge would be what 1-0 is sort of debating is how do I get people to play the game without actually releasing or anything official getting out there, without getting it to the general public. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Mm-hmm.
But also in the same token, Josh, like what you were saying about how AAA studios deal with new game ideas. Are these games any good? I've worked on 2 games that after 6 months were cut. So clearly somebody was testing this game out somewhere to see if it was worth continuing the investment. So there was one game we worked on. I forget what it was called. It was like basically a Grand Theft Auto, but in Hong Kong. And we all rolled onto that after one of the Spider-Man titles. And everyone was getting excited about it. It passed the first round over there at Activision. It passed the second round, and was it going to get launched, you know? And apparently a couple of the other games at some of the other studios around town were all competing with, you know, with each other, who could make the best new game. And they would have a lot of testers play these games. And they had probably put a good $20 million into the game I had worked on. It was a big studio, but yet they cut the project. So if they're willing to do that, I think we as indies need to take a real hard look at our product and say, is this worth fighting for? Did I really nail it on the first try?
Yep, and what you just said there about cutting a project, you know, that sentence I think is unknown to a lot of indie developers. This idea that, let me cancel this idea, let me, you know, put this on the back burner. And it's one of the problems that a lot of indie developers struggle with, is this idea of, is this worth pursuing? And again, when you don't have overhead, when you don't have to worry about, you know, a $30 million budget or hundreds of people working on this game for the next 3 to 5 years, you can do whatever the heck you want. But, like we've said, is it something people are going to be interested in? Like, if you have no intention of, if you don't care about making money off of this game, and this is to the developers watching this, you can put something out there. If you want to put it on itch or, you know, release a free version, power to you there. But for a lot of developers out there, you have that struggle of, I've already sunk a year into this, you know, I kind of maybe sort of like it, but, you know, I'm still going to work on it. And if you're trying to, you know, square peg into a round hole scenario with your game idea, it oftentimes doesn't work. And I've had the luxury of seeing so many developers who, they find the fun super early on. Like, I played some very impressive action games and Metroidvania games from developers who are just like, yeah, I want to make a Metroidvania, I like platforming, you know, here's my very first version, and they stick that landing like almost day one of their development. But even with that said, the aesthetics weren't on point. There was this game, Vision Soft Reset, that I really loved, and it bombed. It is one of the most impressive Metroidvanias I had a chance to play, and it just utterly bombed, unfortunately, for them. And it goes back to what we said earlier, that if everything isn't on point, you're just kind of putting more bullets in the revolver and playing Russian roulette with it.
So here's an interesting story for you, Josh. The original Matrix film, okay, the Wachowskis pitched the idea to the studio. The studio was like, okay. They weren't totally sold on it, but the Wachowskis really believed in the idea. So what they did next is they hired a comic book artist to draw the entire story as a comic book and show that to Warner Brothers. And Warner Brothers said, okay, we see how this could be fun. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to fund you to make the first 10 minutes of the movie. And that's it. So they made the first 10 minutes of the movie, which is the first 10 minutes of the movie. And it's its own little movie, right? If you go back and watch it, the first 10 minutes could be its own film. And they showed it to the higher ups and all the suits. And the suits said, okay, let's do it. So I think what you're saying and what I'm also saying is we're trying to bring that level of, that we call it killing your own babies. Like, don't fall in love with, don't fall in love with it just because it's yours. Taking that sort of like that honest criticism back on our indie games, because, you know, there's a lot of indie games out there. Like, everyone talks about, oh, there's so many indie games. I hear it a lot anyway. There's so many indie games in Steam. You know, most of those indie games suck. They're not very good, right? And there's a glut of really crummy indie games. So once you're past the point of, okay, I just want to make a game, and you actually want to do it for a living, I think you have to be really brutally honest with yourself and look for that good idea and really, really try and find the good idea versus trying to just finish a game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, like, the act of finishing a game is still a monumental achievement. To Soren's comment, like, yeah, if you can kill 5 projects, but if you learn and improve along the way, then at least something of value was gotten out of it. And it is that struggle again of just, like, the example, like Angry Birds or Five Nights at Freddy's, like Rovio and Scott Cawthorn, they've spent years trying to find that one hit. And nobody knew who Rovio was or Scott Cawthorn before their hits. And there's this tendency, I think, from people in and outside this industry to not understand what goes on behind the scenes. And this is I can go on like an hour-long rant on this one topic. That, yes, Darkest Dungeon or Among Us or Celeste, it did really well. Or it eventually did really well with Among Us' case. But it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to put into words what actually happened to make this game succeed. Because most of the time, it's not just the gameplay that worked. People will say, oh, Darkest Dungeon succeeded because it was brutally difficult. Or it succeeded because it was Lovecraft, and that's all it needed. No, there's a lot that happens that most people will never understand. And even in the day, it can just be luck about why a game succeeded one day.
Yeah, it can just be luck. But I think for us to count on luck would be a bad business strategy.
Yes.
Now, sometimes you can become an overnight success, but 10 years in the making, right? I think that's what we're going back to with Angry Birds and Five Nights at Freddy's, right? And so yeah, I mean, this particular product I have out right now, the demo, Death of the Rising Sun, is a demo because I didn't want to fall into the same trap I did with the game before that and the game before that. So I'm iterating on my process, not just as a designer and as a developer, but also as a marketer, right? And I think it's important that we all take that into account. Now, some games, I remember working on. I've been told this. There's 3 things that make a successful, meaning monetarily successful game. The first is the perfect game, right? You make a game and it's absolutely perfect. All right. Okay. I mean, there's not very many of those, but that's one way. The next way is that you come along with a license, right? So say you get Spider-Man, right? A lot of the Spider-Mans weren't very good, but they sold great because of Spider-Man, right? Same with like a lot of the Call of Duty sequels, right? But it's a licensed known entity. And then the third is just throw a lot of money at marketing. And these are the 3 strategies that are used and employed by the AAA studios. These are the 3 strategies. So us as indies, right, we have to make sense of that. Now, I think we need to, but really try and do as much of all 3 as we can. I mean, keeping in mind we're not going to be using a licensed product, but we can use a proven game strategy. I think what's interesting when I've been watching a lot of your videos, Josh, is how you're breaking down the strategy of what this game is doing to make it fun, right? You're really looking and analyzing these games and what they do. Like the first beginning of the game was different than the next. Like they're switching it up on you. They're giving you one type of game and then a different type of game. And then kind of in the middle of the game, the action kind of goes down and becomes more of like a puzzle game. Like all that is super valuable information for us indies to know. So I think that analyzing successful products is a really great way for us to learn on the back of the larger studios, to make that great game. And then, of course, we're not going to have $50 million to throw at marketing, right? But if it's important enough to throw $100 million of marketing at $100 million game, I think we owe it to ourselves to dig a little deeper and see why these studios feel that it's okay to spend that much money on something that we don't even think is valuable, right?
Yeah. And trying to get that value, I think, is one of the hardest parts of this, because nothing exists in a vacuum, especially in game development. And this is something that I have, I think maybe some of the developers will argue with me, but it is true that everything has been inspired or will be inspired by something else.
Yes.
And like one of the things that I'm sure for you and for everyone watching, like I will compare systems and I will talk about them, and that's not trying to say, oh, you did like this, but this is so much better. It's about understanding that there are foundational elements, I feel, in game design, and consumers expect a certain level of that. Like if you're making a platform, if you want to say I want to build the next Super Meat Boy, and your platforming system is terrible, guess what? Nothing else matters. Your game is going to be terrible because of it.
Yeah.
And like we've said, if you can't figure out why somebody wants to play your game, you're not going to be able to make something people want to play. Because the act of getting the game out there is not going to convince a consumer. And let's see. Also, as a quick time check, we are over an hour and a half in, and like we said earlier, like I knew this was going to run long. So, I guess how you feel in terms of keep going.
I'll leave when you want me to leave. I'm enjoying the conversation actually, and I'm enjoying reading the comments. Did you want to? If you want to get off, just let me know. But I'm perfectly happy to stick around a little longer.
Okay.
Did you want to address the question about cinematics?
Yeah, and a few of the other questions that nobody submitted. I figure time-wise, let's go for maybe like another, I would say maybe like 20-25 minutes. I feel like usually around like the 2 hour mark is when everyone starts to feel like the chat. Like we all sort of like feel our eyes drooping. But like I said, like this has been a great conversation, and there's nothing stopping us from doing a part 2 when you have more time.
Of course, Josh. I'm really impressed by your game design stuff, watching it. So to be here and talking to you and even talking about it is great, because game design is not my super strength.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed some of your when you play and talk about them.
Thank you. Let me see. So nobody asked. We already did the marketing. Anything else you want to cover regarding the cinematic question?
Yeah, so okay, the two major tools that I think we have as game designers and indie game creators wanting to make cinematics.
Mm-hmm.
I would say stick with Unreal or Unity. I think they have great cinematic tools. I've created cinematics in both platforms using it was Cinemachine in Unity. And I actually have a YouTube video showing myself doing all that. If you go to, I think it's Andy Swy on YouTube, did a video just showing how I did that. And then Unreal has what's called, it used to be called something else and they changed the name. It's just called Cinematics. It's all built in. So both of them work great. If you watch some videos on how to use it, they're pretty easy to figure out. It doesn't take a lot of time to get the hang of it. If you, I think the challenge starts to come in when you need animations for characters. I definitely would say use as many free resources that either Unity or Unreal will give you, because not too many people probably making the whole game want to spend a lot of time making animations or getting a mocap system. It's kind of a lot of work. And I think that this is where we start to broach the line of where people say, oh, don't asset flip my game, when really like everything we use was built by somebody else to some degree, right? So Unity, I really like the Cinemachine. I think it works great. I don't have a problem with any of it. I thought it worked very well. I did notice, though, that it did take some expertise from a coder to get like trees not to pop. Maybe I'm getting a little too granular here, But there were some funny little issues I noticed with the Unity one, but a programmer was able to fix it. The Unreal one seemed to work pretty much without a hitch, which is not a surprise because I feel like Unreal is more geared toward artists than it is coders, and vice versa for Unity. At least that's my opinion, having used both platforms. But either one of those are phenomenal systems. I highly recommend them both, even if you just want to pre-render it out and use it as a movie file rather than live. Either one of them I would strongly recommend. I would stay away from products like Maya or Blender or 3ds Max to do pre-rendered at this point. I think that that's actually a step backward, in my opinion.
Okay. Let's see. Another question, and Nobody, thank you so much for the super chats as well. I really do appreciate it. They ask, can you go over a few challenges that your company ran into with Spider-Man's web slinging?
All right, so the web slinging, here we go. Okay, I remember going, so I kind of graduated to Activision, if you will, and I was young at the time and maybe like a little arrogant. So I went back to my old studio where I started as an intern. They were mocking the web slinging harshly, like really just mocking it. But I worked at a AAA studio, so it was very easy for me to say, well, I didn't work on that. That had nothing to do with me. But I think that the web slinging greatly improved in the later versions, which I find quite interesting. And that's unique about games, though, because usually the sequels and movies are not very good. Whereas in games, most of the time, like the sequels start to get better. Right? You have Super Mario Brothers, right? The one that we all remember was kind of a sequel. You have, I don't want to go. I can't remember at the top of my head, but sequels tend to get better. And I did notice that the Spider-Man games, in my opinion, the web slinging was greatly improved. I think the first time it was kind of an afterthought, but so many people complained about it on the message boards, just tearing it apart. Even I think dropping it from like an 82 rating to a 79, like on like just the web slinging, like pushed it down into a C game, right? Made them take enough notice to where they focused an entire team of people on just the web slinging. And that's something as indies we should, consider how that they took seriously. Does that answer your question?
We'll see if they say anything. You were kind of cutting in a little bit in and out. I'm not sure. There may be like an internet connection issue or something.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I didn't know.
That's okay. Let's see. Another question. Then this is going back to when we were talking about like demos and such. That nobody asked about. They're worried about leaks or building hype prematurely. I guess about when do you demo your game? Is they can't do NDAs, but they need feedback. So I guess like this is something I think a lot of people tend to start with, like on the independent side, is that the fear that somebody's going to steal their game or that information is going to get out that they don't want to. And I think I don't know. I feel like if you're an independent developer, I think the feedback is more than important, but I think this goes like we were saying earlier about what to show people. Like, obviously, you want to get feedback as early as possible, but you still need to have something you need to have something for them to consume. And it has to be at the point where you have to feel that it's ready. And I think that is where a lot of developers struggle with.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? It's a balance. Like, is it ready? But it needs to be early and it needs to be often, in my opinion, but not so early people don't understand the concept. So if you have basic game design and you have a loop and you want to test it, I think that there's nothing wrong with getting it out there early. I would. So the CEO of Google said, your first release should embarrass you. That's his words, not mine, right? So if that's what he's saying, and I need to think about that. So how long am I going to sit on my idea before I decide that it's ready, And that's, I think, a question that you have to make on your own. But if you wait too long, you're you're making it harder for yourself, right? I show things to people quickly. I don't care if they say they don't like it or not. I just have to brush it off. If they say that there's a problem with it, I want to hear what the problem is and I want to fix it and move on. I don't want to just nurture a bad idea.
Yes.
And like, do it soon. Do it now, next week. I don't know. I don't know how long your development is. Does your game loop there? Is it showing what the game is? Are you saying what you're trying to say? Is the story there? Like, if it's not, get it in quickly. Minimum viable product. Don't worry about some of the bugs. Just say, it's full of bugs. Just try it out. I mean, my demo's full of bugs. If you want to see a full of bugs demo that's being thrown out to the world for just to get feedback on, and I know it's missing some major stuff, you can see what I feel is good enough. If you go to deathoftherisingsun.com, you can download it and you can see what I think is a good enough demo to get out there, knowing that it's got issues. A lot of the systems aren't fleshed out, but I want to know, do I want to keep working on this or not? Like, I want to hit something. I want to hit the ball at some point, and I can only take so many swings. So I need to know whether I need to move on or not. And that's really the only perspective I can give.
Yep. And again, it's tough to think about that in terms of, yes, I like my game, but if everyone I show this game to says I hate it, or they're just like, yeah, it's okay, what you need to understand what to do with that feedback. And that, again, like being able to take feedback, that is a skill in of itself. And it's something a lot of people struggle with. Like there's, and I see it like both ways. I see people who they take no feedback. It's like, it's not my fault. It's your problem why my game doesn't work for you. But then there's also I'm going to take all the feedback and I'm going to make every change, even if it, contradicts each other. And then we end up with that game that never ends. And there are people who have worked on games for like 5 to 10 years. And the sad part about this is that if a game is taking 5 to 10 years to be developed, something has gone wrong in the pipeline somewhere, whether you want to admit it or not.
So, yes, I know these people. They do exist. And I think that you really should be getting... So someone once asked Stephen King, how long should it take to write a novel? And he said 6 months. And he said, if you can't say what you're going to say in 6 months, then you don't know what you're talking about. So I think that 6 months for me is when you should launch a demo. That's my opinion. And but I live to that. I stick to that. And I think it's a good thing. And I think it helps you recalibrate and really get back to what's important. That doesn't mean that you have to jump back into it right away. You can take a hiatus, you can try something else, but go back to it and then give it another shot. And then maybe you'll know at that point if this is going to work or not and move on. I think 10 years, if someone's spending 10 years making a game that they're not sharing with people, it's sort of like they're making a diary. Maybe they're not really intending on sharing it, perhaps. And, getting criticism, I think, is just part of creating something. If you're making an experience that you're going to be sharing with other people because you want them to enjoy it, and they give you criticism, that's just part of the give and take of being a creative. That's just part of the experience. And you learn from their mistakes and you move on. And it's okay. I think, like I said a while back, I got some really snarky comments on my Facebook ads that I was putting out, and I sort of felt like that was okay, welcome to the club. You're part of the group now. And you just kind of have to take it like that.
Yep.
It's okay. It's okay. People beat you up online. I mean, if you're scared to put your game out there because you're scared of what people will think, maybe indie development is something that really is just a personal project and experience for yourself. You're not really looking to put something out there for people to make an opinion on.
Yep.
Have Josh play it and tear it apart.
There we go. Exactly. And then just sit in horror when sit in horror as I find all the bugs, or I go to click start and the game crashes right then and there.
Well, it's your fault. Your graphics card wasn't up to date.
There we go. Exactly. Let's see. Let's see. Mr. asked about when should you get a trademark for your game? And I feel, I don't know, this is something I don't really think about all too often. Any thoughts on that from you?
Well, what I like to do is whenever I pick a name for a game, whether it's Remnants of the Dawn or Death of the Rising Sun, first thing I do is I want to see if there's any other games of that same name. If there aren't, then I'm good. If I'm picking Final Fantasy, like that's a problem. So I usually avoid games that already have names. Next, I really try and find a name that has a .com attached to it. And then the next thing I do is I put a Steam page up as quickly as I can, and I buy the .com. And then I put something out there on Steam that says the name, basically like, okay, this name's taken, right? I do a page on Steam. Now, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, but I have talked to lawyers in the past about trademarking other things, and it is a very expensive and complicated process. And unless you really have something that people want and are going to try and steal from you, you're going to end up spending probably between $10,000 and $20,000 just trademarking that. They have to exhaustively go back through the records to make sure no one else did already. And they're really hard to enforce. Like, you have to hire lawyers to even enforce trademarks. But by putting it on Steam, I kind of already am signaling to the community at large, hey, this is taken. And Steam, I don't think will let another game come out of the same name. I think they'll block it, if I'm not mistaken. So that might be a good way to kind of like squat on your spot.
It's definitely a little weird with naming, and that I think is another that's another universal topic we can get to. Let's see. And also, since we are about to hit 2 hours, this will be official last call for questions from the chat. So if anyone has any, please get them in now. Because as soon as we're done with these questions, I think we'll do kind of like final wrap-ups, and then we'll end things for today. Let's see. So we got to Mr.'s question. Where was it? There's that. Amir10, did you ever have a chance to work with Tomo on anything?
Yes, we worked on Spider-Man together.
Nice.
Yeah. In fact, I remember, it seems like every studio has that lunchtime game that everybody plays. And so we were playing, it was a strategy game. It was I forget which strategy game it was, where you have the trebuchets and everyone's like attacking each other.
Age
like
of Empires?
Armies. Age of Empires, that's what it was. And so Tomo was notorious for just decimating everybody.
Well, now I know if we ever do play that for multiplayer, now I have to get him on my team. Let's see. Jerome asked, where was it? Just saw his question. Here's, any specific lesser-known marketing tips for indies?
Yeah. Use Steam. Steam has a lot of stuff. Steam has a community group page. You can post to the news feed. I was making this sort of assumption that I had to bring people to Steam, and there's people already there. So if I want to play a game, I'm not going to go to Facebook and scroll through my ads. I'm going to go to the App Store. I'm going to go to the marketplace, and that's where you want to find placement. And lately, I've been noticing like my Facebook ads were just a big. I mean, they work, but not really. And I was talking to this one. I've been talking to a lot of marketing people and a lot of publishers, and it's not one post on Facebook; it's 500 posts that start to move the needle. So. And TikTok is the same way. It's 500 posts. Reddit won't let you include a link anymore, which is kind of annoying. So you have to kind of like put something out there that's really exciting. But I really think that focusing on Steam itself, because that's where people go when they want to download a game, an indie game, is probably a place you want to be.
Mm-hmm. And I would add to that, you definitely want to make sure your Steam store page is up to par. That's why we do our Thursday shows with Shark. And we are very critical on them because, again, so much about the business side of game development is getting people excited about your game. It doesn't matter, again, if you have the best damn game if you can't convince somebody to even click on the store page. I
Yeah.
mean, when I'm like in my free time, I also look on like sites like Keymailer and Hoovit for games to check out, and so many, even just like a thumbnail that is bad, I'm not even bothering to check on that game because on the sad truth is that nine times out of 10, if the thumbnail is poor, I'm gonna click on that game and I'm just gonna see a disaster.
Right.
And I have, again, the games that I have seen, most people, I have, it's like I have war stories of this, of some like the horrible things I have witnessed on some of these store pages and descriptions of games that are just like, there is absolute. I don't think like anyone would ever buy this game or even play if it was free. Kind of like horrors of like some of the things I have witnessed there.
So, Josh, something that I tried also was I A/B tested a lot of my
Mm-hmm.
icons. And for those of you who don't know what that is on Facebook, you can just run an ad pretty easily. So you
Mm-hmm.
put an image up and you see if people click on it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you send another image and see if people click on it, basically with the same metrics for both.
Mm-hmm.
And if people click on one more than the other, then go with the other, and then keep doing that a bunch of times until you really find, you sort of like, it's almost like you're killing off your sort of herd of bad ideas, and that one is left standing.
Right. Yep. And again, if you can get rid of what doesn't work, that is
You're left with
definitely
what
a.
does.
It sounds so simple when we say it like this. Again, I don't know why I even need this channel or my website. Game development's easy. It's just that simple. Just do all the right stuff. Don't do the bad stuff. Your game will sell 5 million copies. We're done. We can cancel it.
I think what makes indies unique though too is that it sort of accentuates our eccentricities, right? Because like you were saying, just do what works. Yeah. Well, the thing is that everything we do doesn't seem to work, and we have only some areas that we're good at. So you have to kind of gear everything toward
Mm-hmm.
your strong suit. And I think that's why marketing for indies is so hard, because everybody's different.
Yeah.
Everyone's unique.
Oh yes, and there are some games out there that are just like so eccentric in their designs that it feels almost like a flip of a coin as to whether or not they're going to succeed or fail. Like I've seen games like a Cruelty Squad that is just like, it looks like an absolute just like crazy mess of like assets and design, and there's an audience for it. And it is, I think, tough for, again, going back to what we said about indie development, it's tough to know sometimes what works. And even if you do something that works, it's not going to work for everybody.
That's
And
true.
that, again, like that's another. I don't want to go too far in that now because we'll be here for like another hour or two just on that one sentence. But it is tough to understand that everything that you do that inherently is going to attract somebody will probably repulse or de-attract somebody else. And
It's
yeah, go ahead.
important to factor that in
Yeah.
when you're getting your criticism too. Like if you are appealing to a niche market, or
Mhm.
just you're making a third person shooter, but the person playing the game really only likes Candy Crush style games, they're just going to hate on your game, and you're just going to have to
Yep.
filter that out.
Yeah. But if you're making a third person shooter, and let's say people are complaining that the guns feel off, or, it's just hard to shoot anything, that's basically like a warning. You get the raid siren should be going off in your head that you need to change this.
Yeah. So get it out early, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe too, like a third person shooter like you have in your head is not something anyone wants to play.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important to get feedback, and also feedback is a big part of marketing. Like it's real easy for us to sit on these ideas and wait until the last minute and go, oh, okay, I'm gonna market like crazy. Well, if you start getting feedback and putting the game out there for people to comment on and criticize, like, I don't think it's ever too early to get feedback. All of a sudden your marketing is already moving forward. And a lot of the people that are on my Discord are like advocates for certain things they want to see in the game now. And they're turning into fans and they're spreading the word, even though they played a game that was incomplete. And that's great. And that's what you want to do, is like build that community by releasing your really rough concept.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is, again, about figuring out what's good and what's bad about a game. And again, I'm sure that's an easy explanation for everyone. But I know we are about 2 hours in, and I think this is usually around the time that everyone starts to kind of like drone out. They love, people have said, my voice like ASMR, but I'm sure they're starting to fall asleep at it. But this has been a great chat. I guess to end on, anything, any other like words of advice, anything you want to kind of talk about, like expand on before we say goodnight?
Yeah, if you're an indie gamer and you want to get into the AAA industry, really you want to focus on one thing, whatever your strength is. Focus really hard on that. So, like for me, it was art. So I got really good at doing arts, particularly levels and creating environments. So if that's something you want to go toward, you really want to get at one thing, which is kind of the opposite of everything we've discussed today. So that's something to keep in mind. But I want to encourage everybody that, I would definitely put your ideas out there soon. Just go for it. Give it a shot and see what people say. Sometimes things that you think are terrible are actually really good. You just have been looking at it too long.
Yep.
And again, enough?
I'm sure. And again, we could fill probably a few more casts. But Andrew, it has been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. And like I said, if you are free in the coming weeks, definitely we can schedule for another one. I know we originally, when we were playing this, I think you were going to have a child. I think we had to push that back. So congratulations first off on that.
Thank you. I had a newborn daughter, and my wife said, "You're not abandoning me. You just on this one."
And again, consumers don't care if you're going to miss the birth of a child, I'm afraid.
Josh, it's been awesome. A real honor. I get so much out of your channel, and also a shameless plug, deathoftherisingsun.com. If you want to sign up for my free demo and give me feedback, I'm looking for lots of feedback. I know it's not done, and it's okay.
There we go. And again, I'm sure we can certainly have you back on. There's definitely a lot more to talk about, and definitely when the game is further along or at the point that you're ready to, blab as much about the design.
I don't know if I'll ever be ready for you specifically, but yes. Maybe the chat can play it, right?
Yeah. But thank you again, and anything social media wise you like to plug, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I have a YouTube channel, Andy Swy, ANDYSWI. I talk a lot about being a professional in the industry on there, and I also do show stuff about the projects that I'm working on. And also, again, deathoftherisingsun.com is my game, and if you would wish list me on Steam, I would love it. Thank you. That's the currency that that we're all looking for to get a publisher to pick up the game.
There we go. But again, thank you so much for coming on, and for the audience watching as well, thanks again to Nobody for the super chats. Again, I really do appreciate the support. I do appreciate when people reach out and say how much they love my content. Again, it's always great to know you're not just screaming into the void sometimes. But
thank you, Josh.
Not a problem. But with that said, we're going to wrap things up for this week's chat. As always, if you're new, check out the Discord and Patreon link down below. If you are in the game industry or teaching design or just working on a game that you'd like to come on and talk about, we are always looking for guests for these shows. So please reach out and come back for daily discussions on game design here and on Game Wisdom, where he's in the art and science of games. Until our next stream, everybody, take care.